Okay, so just to introduce myself, my name is Jackie Murphy. I am the application consultant manager here at Anatomage. So my team does all of the training sessions, the webinars, and today I'm going to walk you through some of our new content within the functional anatomy section of our Table 11. So the session today, it'll be kind of a brief session going over the respiratory physiology and the renal physiology, which are brand new to Table 11 here. All of these webinars will be recorded and downloaded from Anatomage Share, so you can always record them or always download and rewatch them from there. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and dive right into these two topics. What I'm going to do here is shut my camera off to avoid any extra lag that might occur and jump into first our renal physiology here. So from your home menu here, if you are new to Table 11, which I'm sure all of you are, you'll notice a bunch of additions to the functional anatomy. So the first one here is going to be the respiratory physiology, which is what I had clicked to open this. And the second one we're going to go through is the renal physiology. So you see when I turn on this scan here, I have this transparent view setup of the lungs. You also notice kind of similar if you've ever used our cardiovascular tubes, this path of the flow, mimicking inhalation here, inhalation and exhalation. You might notice the lungs inflating, deflating slightly. And there's a couple other controls here, but just to talk about what you see on the right side with these two graphs here, the top graph is a spirometry trace. And just as a definition of spirometry, this measures how well your lungs function by evaluating how quickly you can inhale and exhale the air and how much air you're inhaling and exhaling as well. So you can see that from this top graph here, measured in volume of obviously the air inhaled and exhaled. And then the bottom graph is the pulmonary pressures, and that measures the blood pressure in the lungs. So the top blue curve here is going to measure the alveolar pressure, and the red is the intrapleural pressure. And the main point of this is that you see they both are synchronized during respiration. They act in the same. The graphs are pretty similar. Okay, so there's some of the controls that already have existed within Table 10 that should look pretty familiar. For example, you have your orientation tools. You can save any presets available. You can add different things like pins or use your pen tool here and take screenshots. So pretty similar to the same functions that exist in Table 10, and you can use all of those here. The difference that I'm going to go through is on the right side here, what you can do with these graphs, as well as the inhalation, exhaling actual lungs there. So if I pause this right side, I can make different adjustments. Like for example, increase the respiratory rate. And you'll notice how when I hit play again, the graphs adapt to that increased respiratory rate. I can also make adjustments to minimal tidal volume, maximum tidal volume, and things like manual breathing if I wanted to see different effects. Like now you really can see an exaggerated versions of the lungs and the diaphragm moving as inhalation, exhalation is taking place. And I can see if I control the manual breathing, you'll notice that this can control the lungs and the diaphragm on the 3D side. Okay, so I'm just going to set this a medium respiratory rate and everything else just all pretty much in the middle there. I can also turn on max breath, and you'll notice this is more so a deep inhalation, exhalation. And if you just follow the graph here, you can see how that changes when it gets to that max breath. And also turn on labels. If you want more detail on what these graphs are measuring. And I can turn on and off this scroll, which really just has the graphs with a lead line or not. You notice now there's no lead line, or there could be a lead line. Okay, so that is the respiration portion, but we also have included a bronchoscopy within this same module here. So a bronchoscopy is a procedure that allows a doctor to examine the inside of the lungs using a thin tube called a bronchoscope. So what this has meant, and if you've ever used our fly-throughs on any of our current table versions, you'll notice this is pretty similar, except it allows you to have a bit more control. So as I scroll through here, on the 3D, it's showing me the path that I'm actually going through. But what I can do here is kind of scope around and adjust the view that I'm looking at here. So I can scroll this as much as I want all the way down to more so mimic how that procedure of a bronchoscopy would go. It's pretty manual. You're doing piece by piece there. And these are the bronchoscopy labels that will appear. Otherwise, this path is going to take down the left primary bronchus. And again, from here, I could rotate if, say, you were examining the walls here. This procedure is used to identify things like tumors, airways, blockages, different infections, and it can also actually remove some of the tissue samples, remove foreign objects, replace different tubes. But obviously, this procedure is just showing the different path here. Okay, I'm going to jump over to our renal physiology. And if there are questions at the end, I'll see if there's any particular questions. So as I mentioned, from the functional anatomy tab, we open the renal physiology portion. And this opens with, you'll see these different particles kind of moving throughout the 3D, as well as this histology slide of an actual nephron. So this is one of our histology slides from the histology library that we made more interactive, where you can actually see the path of particles, and more particles appear in the areas where they are reabsorbed, and so on from there. Now, again, like we talked about in respiratory function, similar icons available. This slider bar will just show you, you can make the 3D more transparent here, or less transparent. And then this is playing through the different stages. So different pieces of the nephron that the filtrate or liquid is going through. So this is just playing through all of them. You can stop and jump to individual phases as well. The slider bar on my right-hand side, I can increase the brightness depending on what I want to see with these particles here. And let's say I'm curious to see where the majority of Na+ is reabsorbed, filtered. I can always shut off the other chemicals and you can get a better feel for what's happening at what stage. Like much more happens at the proximal convoluted tubule than the collecting duct. And I could do that same thing for H2O, things like hydrogen, and some of these other ions here. This, I can also turn on the individual labels of the nephron to get more of a description of what each part of this nephron is and what particles are going through what part. So it's more of an interactive histology slide here. And you can also save anything here as presets, like you could do in the other parts of our software as well. Okay. And one thing that I want to share, and I will put this in the chat right at the end of this session if you're interested in downloading these materials. But we have these additional activities that respiratory physiology will more so walk through some of the different things that we just talked about, but also add a little bit of questions. So just by viewing the scan, the first question could be the muscle that sits under the lungs and moves is what? And the student would have to then fill that out. This muscle contracts or relaxes during inhalation or contracts or relaxes during exhalation. And kind of just walking through, if you want your students to get on the table to explore this different module, this is an activity that they can go through, follow along to get a feel for how it actually functions. We also have the answer key for that. And we also have an activity for the renal physiology identification. So let me X out of some of these. It's more of a labeling activity. Now you can choose to have these labels on like you see here. So they're really just walking through, getting a feel for what they're seeing here, or you can shut those off. And then the trickier part here is using that flow of the different ions to describe the function of each of those parts of the nephron. So I'll put these two in the chat, how you can download from Anatomage Share if you're interested in taking a look at those. But otherwise, I want to see if there are any questions or anything in particular you wanted to go through. Otherwise, that's pretty much the gist of these two new features here. Again, not too much to learn, just additional content for you to explore and use in your different lectures. So any questions? You can also feel free to put any questions in the chat. Yes. So the question is, does the slider on the bottom in respiration also make things transparent? Yes, it does. Yeah, any other questions? Again, this will be on Anatomage Share to download. If you're like, oh, what did that one, feature do again? You can always rewatch any of these. If you just wait here one more second, I'm going to actually go ahead and stop this recording now. So again, that's your coverage of the respiratory and renal physiology. But if there are questions, please feel free to email us and let us